Hi, I'm Rose. Thanksgiving was supposed to be family, but my mom didn't hug me. She stood up and screamed across the table. We're selling the family business, and it's not yours. They all looked away. They'd planned it. They used my name, took my father's legacy, and erased me. But something my dad left behind changed everything. Want to know what it was? The driveway was already full when I pulled up. No one had bothered to leave space, as if I wasn't expected, or worse, forgotten. I parked halfway on the lawn. The old New England farmhouse stood there like it always had, white siding, black shutters, the big oak tree in front bending under the weight of early snow. It should have felt like coming home, but it didn't. Inside, the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon hit me like a wall. The staff moved like clockwork, setting the long dining table. Candles flickered, polished silverware clinked in the formal dining room. But even with all that warmth, something was off. Too quiet, too staged. I dropped my coat by the stair rail. No one offered to take it. A framed photo of my father, the last one before he passed, stared at me from the hallway. His eyes were always too knowing. Glad the real boss is back, one of the older staff muttered as I passed. I stopped. What did you say? But she was already walking away, tray in hand. That made no sense. When I stepped into the dining room, I realized no one had waited. The table was full, every seat taken, except one. At the far end, away from the fire, away from the light. I sat down. Frank and Meredith were already halfway into a story about one of Frank's new clients, something to do with blockchain investments, which I doubted either of them actually understood. They didn't acknowledge me. Mom didn't look up. Her fork hovered midair, her eyes fixed on something past the windows. So, Meredith said finally, voice syrupy, how's your little bakery doing, Rose? I smiled thinly, still standing. That's cute, she said. Really? Independent woman and all? The staff kept glancing at me. One poured wine and asked, would you prefer the red, ma'am? Ma'am? He'd never called me that. Frank kept tapping his wine glass, nervously, like he was waiting for a toast that never came. Then, Cassandra stood up. She didn't raise a glass, didn't smile. She slammed her own wine glass on the table, hard enough to silence every fork and whisper. We're selling the family business, she said. Loud, sharp, final. Effective immediately. It felt like all the air got sucked out of the room. I couldn't breathe. The wine caught in my throat. Meredith's face twisted into something between smug and satisfied. Frank just looked relieved. They knew. They had known. My hands shook under the table. Since when? I managed. She didn't answer. Instead, a staff member leaned toward me. Ma'am, he whispered, should we inform the board you'll be staying in the house now? What? Another staffer murmured. She owns it, doesn't she? Like they were trying to do the math out loud. A flash hit my mind. Last Thanksgiving. Dad had pulled me aside in the library, voice low, face pale. You're the only one with a soul, he'd said. Protect the legacy. No one else heard that. No one else even noticed. Back at the table, Cassandra sat down and began carving the turkey like nothing had happened. My pulse pounded in my ears. I stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor. No one stopped me. I walked out. Through the hallway, past the old coat rack, and into the cold. Someone followed. I heard the steps. It was Anna, one of the housekeepers who had known me since I was a kid. She pressed something into my hand, a sealed envelope. He said, if it ever came to this. I didn't speak, just nodded and made my way to the garden shed. Dad's old workroom. The letter trembled in my hands as I tore it open. "If you're reading this," it began, "they've already made their move." My breath caught. He knew this would happen. He wrote about documents hidden in the study, about trust terms they'd likely ignore, about the lies he feared they'd spin. And then this line: "Don't try to win their love, Rose. You were never one of them. You were something better." I stared at the ink, cold, alone, but awake. Back in the house, laughter rose again. Plates clinked, as if nothing had changed. I folded the letter, put it in my coat pocket, and looked up through the shed's dusty window. A shadow moved past the glass. Someone had been watching me. After the shed, I didn't go straight to bed. I lingered near the fireplace, the same one Dad used to sit beside with a glass of rye in his hand, telling stories that made no sense until years later. Now it was just ashes and silence. The house had emptied. The guests were gone, the laughter replaced with the soft clinking of dishes and the quiet shuffle of staff packing up leftovers. Cassandra was still in the dining room, humming to herself. She moved around the long table, collecting place cards and rearranging centerpieces like nothing happened tonight, as if she hadn't dropped a bomb and walked away from the fallout. Her fingers danced across the silver napkin rings, fixing them just so. I watched from the hall, hidden in plain sight. Then I saw it. The place card she held, my name. Rosalind. Not Rose. Not even close. Same mistake they've made for years. On emails, on invitations, even the plaque outside the bakery when we opened. Like I didn't exist unless filtered through their version of me. I walked in, picked up the card from the table, held it up. "You ever get my name right, or does it just not matter?" I asked. She didn't look up. "It's a formality." A staff member passing by muttered just low enough for me to catch. "They never got your name right, huh?" Funny, something so small could sting so deep. It took me back, middle school. First day. The substitute teacher called out Rosalind, and when I corrected her, she laughed. Same difference. I let it go. I always let it go. Tonight, I couldn't. I walked past the side hall where old uniforms were boxed for donation. One carton caught my eye, neatly labeled, "Property of Frank." I knelt down, flipped through the folded shirts, aprons, all of them stamped with his initials, none with mine. I had spent summers running books, helping with supply orders, keeping staff schedules when Dad was sick. But in this house, effort didn't equal belonging. "You can't inherit something they never thought you deserved," I whispered to no one. As I stood, Martha, the head of housekeeping, quietly stepped beside me. She'd always had that gentle way of appearing when I needed her most. "I need to show you something," she said. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached into her apron and pulled out a folded piece of yellowed paper. "I kept this. He told me not to let it fall into the wrong hands." We moved into the pantry, far from the dining room's reach. She opened the paper slowly. It was handwritten, unmistakably Dad's. The script curved like a signature I'd traced on bakery checks for years. "If anything happens to me," it read, "trust Rose. She knows what this place stands for." Martha looked at me. "We knew. All of us. We just figured. The delay was legal stuff. Not betrayal." I leaned against the pantry wall, the paper in my hand, absorbing the weight of every ignored word and backdoor meeting I'd walked past over the years. "You were always the real boss," she said. "We just waited for the paperwork to catch up." I wanted to thank her, but the words stuck. Instead, I nodded. That's when I noticed the little changes. My access code to the office upstairs, disabled. The study, once left ajar, now locked tight. The file drawer that used to house Dad's handwritten ledgers, empty. Late that night, I saw them. Cassandra, Frank, Meredith, huddled in the sunroom, whispering behind closed curtains. They stopped when they noticed me watching through the reflection in the glass. I stepped back, not out of fear, out of calculation. I went to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and pulled out my laptop. It took a moment to remember the encryption code Dad had set up for me. Buried in an old text he once sent, disguised as a birthday message, but it worked. The folder opened. Inside, a draft of the trust revision. Unfinalized, no signature, no date, just outlines of what he wanted, and no trace of where the final document went. It was like someone scrubbed him from his own estate. I began taking notes. Conversations. Who said what? Where they moved files? Who looked nervous? I wasn't going to confront them yet. Not until I had something they couldn't deny. Dad once told me, "Control the records and you control the truth." That night, I controlled the only truth left. Just as I was closing the laptop, one more email popped up. Bold, no subject line, just the preview. Asset transfer notification, effective Friday. I stared at it. My finger hovered above the trackpad. Friday. That gave me 2 days. I woke before the sun, drawn by hushed voices drifting through the hallway. My heart tightened. Someone was talking behind doors I didn't have the right to cross. I slipped out of bed, careful not to catch the creak of floorboards, and made my way toward Dad's study. The door was cracked open, voices low, tension palpable. Through the gap, I caught fragments. Transition quietly. Keep her calm. Move without her signature. My name, Rose, was uttered like a footnote, not a name worth arguing over. Mama, did the lawyer say she needs to sign something, or can we act without her? My mother's voice was soft but sharp. Cassandra answered without hesitation. Dad gave me power of attorney after his stroke. We can act when needed. My world, already unstable, shifted harder. My throat felt dry. My father's signature, reassigned long ago it seemed, had bound me out of every agreement. They named real estate agents and buyers I'd never heard of. Keep the staff distracted. They still think she's next in line, someone said. And just like that, the game was over for them. For me, it was just beginning. I retreated to the kitchen, hoping for familiar faces. Instead, I entered mid-conversation. Staff members stuffing boxes, eyes narrowing, hushed glances. Martha froze. I asked, "Is this why Dad's office is locked now?" She sighed, vanished words. "We were told not to get involved in family matters," she said. Another shifted and avoided my gaze. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just forgotten. I was being erased. I went to my room, but silence swallowed me. I couldn't cry. I was too furious, too stunned. The weight of years I thought meant something smashed into me. Late nights balancing ledgers, getting coffee for displaced meetings, soothing staff troubles, none of it counted. Invisible labor for invisible rights. I heard Meredith's voice from downstairs. She was never really part of the business anyway. It stung. Deep. I left the room and made for Dad's garage. His old desk still stood, dusty, neglected. I flipped drawers, found backup USBs, scanned contracts, emails hidden away. One file caught me. A draft letter from Dad, addressed to Cassandra, warning her against sudden moves. "Don't rush the transition," he wrote, "or regret it later." The final signed document was nowhere. I backed up everything to cloud storage, encrypting folders. I whispered in the dark, "You shut me out in daylight, but I'll open every door in the dark." Lunch was supposed to feel light, just sandwiches and soup around the dining table, but nothing about it was light. Not with the way Meredith avoided my eyes, or how Frank scrolled through his phone like the rest of us weren't there. Cassandra led the conversation as if she was hosting a garden party. Something about winter arrangements and wine pairings for the brunch. She was performing control, and we were her reluctant audience. I tried to bring up Dad's voice recordings to mention the documents I'd found. Cassandra cut in before I could finish my sentence. "Let's not bring business into lunch, sweetheart," she said, smile tight. "We all need a break." Her tone dipped just enough to carry warning beneath its sweetness. It's always been that way, controlling the conversation by pretending nothing was wrong. They dressed manipulation in linen napkins and polished silverware. But today, I didn't swallow it. Not again. I placed my fork down, deliberately. "So, are we just going to pretend nothing's happening? That the business is being sold and no one thought I should know?" Every head snapped up. Silence. Then Cassandra gave a short laugh, too loud. "Rose, you're being emotional again," she said, voice syrupy. "This is a delicate matter. You've been out of the loop for a while." Out of the loop? I looked straight at her. Or pushed out? Frank cleared his throat like he was gearing up to defend her, but I didn't let him. I turned to the staff standing nearby, quietly refilling glasses. "Did any of you know I was no longer part of this? That my name meant nothing?" No one answered. Martha looked away. The others avoided eye contact altogether. That silence was louder than any betrayal. Cassandra's expression soured. She stood abruptly, tossing her napkin on the table like it burned her. "I will not be accused at my own table," she snapped, then stormed out. Mother followed her, pausing only to whisper, "You just made things worse, Rose." I sat there, the last one at the table, surrounded by half-finished plates and broken silence. Uncle Everett stayed behind, awkwardly adjusting his cufflinks. "Sometimes the loudest one isn't the strongest," he said quietly, then excused himself. It wasn't support, just a statement, maybe a warning. After the room emptied, I stayed seated a while longer. The stillness settled like dust on my skin. I remembered Dad's voice. "You don't need to shout to be heard. Let your actions echo." So I pulled out my notebook and began to write, not just what happened, but who said what and when. Names, times, details. No more memories. Facts now. As afternoon faded into evening, I made my way to Dad's old den. The place smelled faintly of tobacco and cedar. I unlocked the drawer I'd found earlier. Inside, beneath some brittle invoices, was a small audio recorder. I clicked it on. It still worked. His voice filled the room, raspy, calm, deliberate. "If she rushes it, she'll undo what I built." Another clip. "Rose sees people. That's what makes her dangerous to them." I listened to every second, transcribed every word, labeled files, stored backups. They'd made me invisible. Now I was archiving my existence. Later, I wrote a letter. Short, firm, addressed to both Cassandra and my mother. "I'm requesting written documentation of the business transition. I expect transparency. If you proceed without it, I'll assume hostile intent. No threats, no pleading, just a line, the one I finally drew." I dropped it at Cassandra's door, knocked once, and walked away without waiting. Back in Dad's office, I closed the door behind me. This time, I locked it from the inside. Then came the knock, not on the door behind me, but the front one downstairs. The doorbell, at this hour, but nothing about this house was usual anymore. Night settles early in Vermont. The house is quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and soft, creaking floorboards. In my room, I sit on the edge of the bed, staring at a childhood photo of me and my father. In that image, his arm is around me. But someone's erased half of him, cutting his figure from the frame so only his silhouette remains. They altered the past. They rewrite everything. I reach for the old notebook I'd kept tucked away. My fingers trace Dad's shorthand, Notes he meant for me. Scribbles about clients, margins full of warnings. I used to decode those for fun. Now they feel like fragments of a legacy they tried to bury. I switch on one of the audio recordings. His voice plays, clear. Rose Harper, always Rose. Not Rosalind, not a variation. He said it right. That small detail, that name, becomes a kind of proof. Someone tried to erase me by mangling what should have been simple. I close my eyes. The loneliness presses in. I realize how absent everyone was, how many times I sacrificed and stayed silent. Staying quiet was safe, and being safe led me nowhere. I open my laptop. Using Dad's encryption methods, I dig into public records and company filings. I find a document filed just 2 weeks before Dad died. Cassandra filed for a caretaking provision that assigned her 40% of the company shares, a clause activating during incapacity. But the timing, while he was still alive, is suspect. I compare her digital signature to earlier ones. Differences, subtle but telling. Lines overlap. Some numbers look off, maybe coerced, maybe forged. The feeling inside me rips. She didn't wait for him to go. She moved while he was breathing. I send an anonymous email to the family's lawyer. I attach the document, the audio file, the inconsistencies. I blind copy Dad's former business partner, someone who once praised my quiet influence. I wait. That's the test. Will they respond in support of justice or in alliance with deception? I begin tracing a timeline, notes from tonight, files from the vault, emails, signatures, whom I saw lingering near offices locked. I whisper, when you're cornered, don't scream, strategize. Tonight, I begin to shift from defending to acting. In the hallway, I pass by Benji, Cassandra's teenage son. He pauses outside the study, fidgeting. I stop him. How's your evening? I ask softly. He swallowed. Aunt Cass made Grandpa sign something while he was hooked up to machines, he says, voice low. Mom told me to keep quiet. My pulse sharpens. I nod, giving him a small book from my shelf. Real heroes don't need to shout to win. He glances at it, uncertain, then nods once. I walk on, leaving him in the dim hallway. Back in my room, I write in my journal, no one protects you like you. It isn't a plea, it's a fact I intend to live by now. I pack a folder, the share transfer document, audio files, the forged signature comparisons, notes from that hallway conversation. Tomorrow, I'll visit Dad's old accountant. I won't announce it. I leave a note on my pillow. If anything happens, don't believe what they say. I stand before the mirror. My eyes are red, my jaw tight. I whisper, they think I'm backing down. I'm just backing up. For the run. Silence is no longer safe. No longer. Morning light filtered through the kitchen windows. I rose early, tying my hair back, tucking Dad's old leather notebook under my arm. The house smelled of cinnamon rolls, fresh coffee steeping. But warmth wasn't the same. No one met my eyes. Cassandra sat at the head of the table, unfolding her newspaper as though nothing had shifted. I sat quietly, opened the notebook, and placed it flat before me. A silent sign. I know. An aunt glanced up. You look like him this morning, Rose. I let that land. I hope so, I said. He wouldn't have let this happen. No smiles, no relief, just tension stretching across fine china. Then, mid-scoop of oatmeal, Cassandra announced it plainly. There will be no share transfer to Rose. Dad said she wasn't capable of running anything. Her tone was casual, as if she were reporting the weather. The room froze. Some faces softened, others pinched. Frank swallowed. Meredith looked away. Mom stared at her plate. Cassandra continued coldly, dredging up my failed startup, calling me unstable, painting me as a liability. I opened my mouth to protest, but she cut me off. The gaslight was brutal. This isn't a conversation anymore, I thought. It's open warfare. I excused myself under the guise of getting coffee and slipped into the garage, notebook in hand. Cassandra followed, short footsteps echoing. Once inside, I clicked open the recorder I found earlier. Dad's voice filled the space. Protect the legacy, not let it become a brand. I let that hang a moment before confronting her. You forged the documents, I said softly. You used his illness to gaslight the ownership. Her face tightened. She shrugged as if it were no big accusation. And who's going to believe your word over mine? The fragile little artist? She taunted, voice low. Rage flickered, then hardened in me. I laid out a notarized copy of Dad's 2019 will, a version never filed, never published. Maybe it's not just my word, I said. She stiffened, jaw thinning. The first crack in her composure. The battle lines were drawn. In the brief silence that followed, I warned her. If you continue narrative control, I'll go public. Press, legal teams, former board members, you spin your lies, I'll show my evidence. She tilted her head, amused. Ruin the family over paper? She asked. You sure you want that fight? I held her gaze. You already did. I refuse to lie about it now. She started to walk away. Pausing at the threshold, she cast a warning glance. Be careful. Smart girls get burnt too. Her voice was soft, dangerous. I watched her go, then whispered to myself, then I'll burn brighter. Leaving her behind, I paused in the doorway of Dad's old office. My eyes tracked the doorframes weathering. I glanced down at the garage calendar pinned on the wall, 1997 Thanksgiving edition. Beneath the date, in Dad's handwriting, don't forget to check with Rose about the storefront window lights. Once trivial, now a lifeline. I ran my finger along that faded note. He counted on me, even then. Even if they didn't. My sorrow didn't fade. But purpose fused with grief. I turned and walked back inside. The fight wasn't starting. It had already begun. When I walked into the HFL boardroom that morning, the air was different. I felt it in the shifting glances. The stiff way chairs sat as if they'd been placed for a meeting, not a family dinner. Key staff and former business allies sat around the long table, murmuring in low tones. Cassandra stood up from behind her podium when I entered. Her greeting was polite, her expression composed, but the undercurrent was raw. She knew I would show. I set Dad's notebook and the audio recorder in front of me with calm deliberation. No flourish, just truth laid bare. Monica stood, hands clasped, voice steady. I refuse to support a plan that erases her contributions. The room fell silent. Cassandra paused, brow tightening, as Monica spoke of years when Rose guided operations, quietly smoothing crises the public never saw. She slid forward internal memos, emails from staff praising my decisions, evidence of my quiet leadership. Board members shifted in their seats. Some nodded, others stared. Cassandra tried to interrupt, stammered defenses, but the tide had turned. I swallowed a bitter pride, felt the power shift mid-air. I rose. You sold my name before you could steal my work, I said. My voice was calm but edged. I played a clip from Dad's tape. His voice, firm. Consult Rose on all decisions. The board exchanged looks. Cassandra flailed, trying to call into question my legitimacy. I held her gaze. You've lied long enough, I told them. It's time everyone knew who did the real work. Staff members began to murmur agreement. Some stood. A few offered timid applause. The room breathed differently now. I called for a public announcement. Effective immediately, I assume operational control pending legal review. Cassandra rose, white-knuckled, to override me, but the chairman cut her off, adjourning her motion. At that moment, cameras streamed in. My leak. The hall filled with murmurs beyond the walls. Cassandra stormed out, spitting threats. "You'll regret this." I stepped up to the podium. Quiet, steady. "This company is built on more than names. It's built on trust." My heart pounded, but I refused to tremble. Later, I returned to my office. The live stream was trending. Notifications popped in my encrypted drives. Then, legal notice received. Cease and desist. My fingertips stung at the edges of my hands. I closed the door, locked it behind me. The turning tide had begun, and I was no longer the one being swept away. I sat at my desk with the envelope unopened, just staring at it like it might hiss. The name on the return address made my stomach turn. Whitlock Fenerty. My father used that firm when the cancer first showed up. He trusted them once, but this envelope didn't feel like trust. It felt like a trap. When I finally peeled it open, the language was polished, clinical. A formal cease and desist. They accused me of corporate defamation, malicious interference, and intent to destabilize leadership structures. All for speaking out, all for showing proof. I reread the letter, slower this time. This wasn't just a threat, it was a message, not from the firm, from her, Cassandra. The firm was her glove, but the slap was personal. She wanted me rattled. She wanted me silent, but I'd seen silence eat people from the inside. I left the house an hour later and drove straight into town, past the shops with their fall displays and hollow decorations. Harold's office was 2 blocks from the courthouse. Clean wooden beams still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and dust. He didn't greet me with smiles or pity, just respect. "Your father told me you'd come to me if anything ever smelled like betrayal," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. Inside was a property deed, a small general store on the edge of town. My name on it. My father had bought it the year before he died, never mentioned it once. It hadn't come up in probate, wasn't listed among the assets Cassandra declared. "He had plans for you," Harold said quietly, "but she buried them before you ever saw the blueprint. That building, it was more than property, it was proof. He wanted me to have a piece of something real, and she'd kept it buried like a body. Back at home, I poured everything onto the dining table. Timelines, audio files, staff emails, whistleblower messages. I drafted a counterclaim to the cease-desist. My lawyer warned me, this will drag on for months, maybe years. They'll drown you in paperwork. I didn't flinch. Then I'll drown them in facts. I uploaded everything to a secure cloud, not just 1, 3 redundant drives, labeled folders, time-stamped. If I went down, the truth would stay standing. Monica came by that night. She looked tired, but her voice was solid. "Some of the senior staff are ready to talk. Off the record, they've been documenting changes Cassandra made since your father got sick. Shady HR moves, financial redirects, all of it." I nodded. "Don't push them. Just let them feed it in when they can. Let her wonder who's leaking." That night I called Gerald Marsh, an old business columnist who once interviewed my father. He answered on the second ring. "Is this about Cassandra?" he asked before I even said hello. Later, well past midnight, I found a package at the front door. No return address. Plain Manila. Inside, a photograph of me standing outside the old store earlier that day. The angle told me I'd been watched. On the back of the photo, 4 words, scrawled in thick marker. "Stay in your lane." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked back inside and opened my laptop. Logged the time. Took photos. Emailed the image to my lawyer, my cloud storage, and to myself. Then I clicked over to my security system and ordered an upgrade. Cameras, motion sensors, the works. They're scared, I whispered to myself. That means I'm getting too close. I taped the photo above my desk, not as a threat, as motivation. The next morning, as I poured my coffee, a message lit up my phone. A copy of the property deed had just gone live on a local business forum. Not posted by me, but it was out there. The courthouse wasn't grand. Wood-paneled walls, worn benches, the kind of place that smelled like a mix of lemon cleaner and old paper, but it might as well have been a coliseum. I walked in with Monica on one side and my attorney on the other, chin up, hands steady. Cassandra was already seated across the aisle, surrounded by suits that looked more expensive than useful. She didn't glare. She smiled. That same practiced smirk I'd come to recognize as her version of good morning. The judge didn't waste time. Opening statements, exhibits presented. My father's voice echoed through the courtroom when they played the audio file. The deed to the storefront. The emails. The notarized will. Cassandra's lawyers stumbled when the judge asked why none of this had been disclosed. Her defense turned clumsy, defensive. They blamed oversight. Oversight, I muttered under my breath. That was generous. When it came time for me to speak, I stood. I didn't read from a paper. I didn't need to. My father built something bigger than a business. He built something people depended on. He believed in integrity, even when it was inconvenient. This isn't about inheritance. It's about truth. And restoring what was taken, not just from me, but from the people he trusted. The judge leaned forward, expression unreadable, then made his ruling. The sale was invalid, forged signatures, false succession paperwork. Cassandra was out. I was in. It wasn't joy I felt. Not exactly. It was something quieter, heavier. Like a window had finally opened in a room I didn't realize was suffocating me. As we stepped into the hallway, Harold stopped me. He pulled a yellowed envelope from his jacket. Your father asked me to give you this. I should have done it sooner. I took it with both hands. The paper was soft, corners curled. Inside, his handwriting, familiar, tight loops. The date was just 2 weeks before he died. He wrote about the business, about mistakes he'd made, about not saying what needed to be said while he still had the breath to say it. And then this. Don't carry our weight, Rose. Carry your own light. That broke me, not in a loud way, just one slow tear that slid down and soaked into my coat collar. I folded the letter and tucked it into my pocket like something sacred. Outside, the cameras were already waiting. Flashes, microphones, noise. I stepped to the front with Monica behind me and cleared my throat. This isn't about revenge, I said. This is about respect. For my father's vision, for every employee here, and for what family really means. We'll be closing operations temporarily, not shutting down, listening, restructuring, starting over the right way. Reporters kept shouting questions, but I didn't hear them. Monica touched my elbow. They're calling you boss lady online, she whispered. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in, God, I don't know how long. 2 weeks passed. The courtroom files faded to memory, but the work was just beginning. I stepped through the doors of the old general store, now stripped down to wood floors and the smell of fresh paint. We were turning it into a space for more than coffee and Wi-Fi, a place to breathe, to gather, to build. That night, we set long tables for dinner. Staff, friends, even a few people who once doubted me came. One of them approached, hat in hand, and mumbled, "We didn't know what she was hiding from you." I met his eyes. "Doesn't matter, you're here now." After dessert, I handed out little boxes. Inside, custom keychains, each engraved with their name, and a tiny replica of the storefront. Ownership, not in title, but in spirit. The room got quiet, not sad quiet, settled quiet. Later, I sat alone on the porch, mug in hand. No music, no traffic, just the hum of night bugs and a cool breeze coming in from the hills. Silence used to hurt. It used to feel like being left behind. Now, it felt like space. I pulled the letter from my coat pocket, unfolded it again. One line pulled at me the most. "You were always the fire. I just held the match." I smiled, whispered, "Thanks, Dad." Then I stood, walked inside, and turned off the light.